We're always telling your stories, and it's time someone tells ours. We're humans first, journalists second. We chose this career to give you a voice. Now we're voicing ours. It's true, journalism has much room for improvement, but not all hope is lost, and we want your trust back by humanizing one journalist at a time. We're sharing with you what we go through to bring you the news. The pain, the tears, the trauma, and the mental health struggles. It's painful, and sometimes we even work 2 jobs to make ends meet. But we all have something in common. The passion, the joy, and the love we feel for storytelling and holding the powerful accountable. That includes holding ourselves accountable. So here are stories from us. This is how we want to help improve the news industry. The Awakened Journalist is proud to present Media Healers by Emiliana Molina Fajardo. Hi everyone, welcome again to The Awakened Journalist, to our special project Media Healers. Today we're going to be speaking with Haley O'Brien. She graduated from the University of Marywood and she is currently based out of Pennsylvania. She quit the industry actually in March 2021 to take care of her mental health after she's been in the industry for about 4 years. She started her first job in market size 58, and her second job was actually in market size 4. So without further ado, we're gonna go ahead and let Haley say hello. How are you, Haley?
Hi, Emmy. Thanks so much for having me and letting me share my story.
Of course. Thank you for agreeing to speak with us. So before we get to the whole mental health struggle and your journey on healing, let's start with why you decided to become a journalist.
Sure. Well, since I was a kid, I've always been very active and enjoyed experiencing a lot of different things and meeting new people. So that's what really appealed to me about journalism. I really wanted to be a field reporter, go to different places and experience that. Once I was in college and studying it, I fell in love with, why, the real why that many of us are journalists is because we want a community that's informed and engaged. We see the value in what we do. So I saw that, and those are the 2 reasons why I like being a journalist.
Yeah, I agree, and I think most of us would agree that it's a great platform to help others raise their voice and give their opinions. Haley, I know you quit this year to take care of your mental health. Can you speak a little bit about that? And I know you mentioned you were diagnosed with ADHD as well as generalized anxiety. So what was the breaking point for you to quit the industry?
Sure, there were a lot of different reasons why I left. Things were changing at the station where I was. My position was changing for reasons, beyond my control, and I didn't really want to be a part of that. But also, things are changing very rapidly in the industry. The pandemic changed things a lot. The pandemic made a lot of things more difficult for us. It made a lot of people more disrespectful towards us. And so, there were a lot of times where I was like, I'm just so sick of it. And I felt so wrapped up in the election, the pandemic, so many numbers and so much data and so much misinformation was going around that it was just very frustrating and taxing on my mental health. I was diagnosed with ADHD actually when I was 18. Tried different medications, but it really wasn't that much of a hindrance on my education or my life at that point. So, my ADHD got worse during the pandemic when I was working from home a lot. So I realized that the life that I had created before the pandemic, the very busy and active life I had, was very ADHD friendly. I was so distracted and busy that I was kind of doing well. And then when life slowed down for me, I really struggled to be stuck at home, not be out socializing, not be able to go out and interview people as much as I did. That was really important to my mental health, and I hadn't realized. So, when I left the industry was, when I talked to my doctor and said, I think I'm experiencing anxiety as well. And I've been going to therapy and, learning more about ADHD and why I kind of struggled with certain things. And Yeah, so now I'm just kind of working on it. I've been working as a waitress now to make some money and figuring out what my next move might be. And I gotta say, I might go back into news, and that kind of sounds crazy. And I think some of my family and friends would maybe say it's crazy because they saw how stressed out I was. It is such a high pressure job constantly. It never ends, and you never feel caught up on, knowing everything that's happening around you. So I definitely am doing better now. I'm like less stressed, sleeping better, taking care of myself. That's been the biggest thing, is just taking care of myself, eating better, cooking, um just like doing things I never had the time to do before.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I think the pandemic and elections definitely led a lot of us to be completely burnt out. And it's nice that you were able to take this break and that you're now reconsidering going back into the industry, because I think once you decide to become a journalist, it's kind of in our blood, and it's a passion that for most of us never really goes away. Before I ask you what is making you think about going back, I wanted to ask you, because I spoke to another reporter who also took about 10 months off for her mental health and was waitressing. And she mentioned that she was making even more money when she was waitressing than what she was in the industry. Is that your case, or is it different?
So I'm lucky that I made more than I think most reporters in the industry. Before I got my last job in Market 4, I thought I was going to leave the industry too, because I just couldn't compute, a low salary and paying rent anywhere that wasn't where I was. So, I was lucky that I made enough there, but I did, encounter a problem where I wanted to make the transition out of news. I looked into public relations, marketing, social media jobs, video jobs, and it was really difficult to find. It still is, really difficult to find someone that will meet my salary where it was when I'm not so experienced in anything other than being a reporter.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I've actually been having that struggle myself. Like I've been applying to PR jobs, communication jobs, and no luck yet, because nobody knows me on that field either. I've built my career on journalism, so I feel you. Okay, and
Yeah.
what do you think is making you want to go back into the industry?
Yeah, well, part of the reason why I wanted to share my story with you is because things are changing and the industry needs to catch up, I think. As a young person working in newsrooms, I feel like we were frowned upon by some people who maybe resent us because, in this very, very rapidly changing industry, with the way people are consuming media changing so much, it took a while for a lot of news stations and media outlets to really catch up to social media and pay attention to, what people are consuming and how they're doing it. So, I mean, the misinformation that has gone around this past year has been so frustrating. I feel like, there really should be more regulation in social media, and that, you know, the media industry should be catering to that. So money needs to be put in the right places. Right now, a lot of TV stations, which is my experience working in broadcast TV, a lot of the demands are, you need to fill this many minutes of television. We don't care what it is. And there's less focus on what's important that we should be spending time on. And there's just this old fashioned formula, this old fashioned mindset. I had colleagues, photographers I worked with, who, when they started, they used pagers and payphones to gather the news and communicate with the newsroom. Things are so different now, and that was only a few decades ago. So I just think that um, managers, they're often the older folks, they're the more experienced, but the younger people have a lot of insight. And I think I had a lot of that frustration. Um, in the newsrooms that I worked in was, hey, I'm the one who's going out in the field every day. I can tell you if they're sitting down and watching TV at 6 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock at night, and people aren't doing that anymore. And I tried to bring that to, my bosses and say, we really need to be investing in staff for digital and, our online presence. So I think that things need to change, and I'd like to be part of that change. I tried so hard in the last year to push through. I thought, this is just really hard times right now with COVID. I mean, it was, and and anyone who's watching this who knows, who worked as a journalist knows that, people aren't calling you back. People are calling you fake news. People don't believe, what you're putting out there. I can give you one example that really bothered me. Was a woman I knew in the area where I was a local news reporter. We had been reporting repeatedly that the reason why people need to adhere to COVID regulations was because hospitals were overwhelmed. So even if you are young and you're not so much worried about getting COVID, well, we would report this. If you got in a car accident or if someone had a heart attack, you might not be able to get into the hospital and get the care you need. So that's why we need COVID cases to go down. Anyway, I was tagged in a Facebook post about that. And they tagged me personally and said, this should be on the news. And that really bothered me because I'm like, well, clearly you're not watching the news. And here you are publicly calling me out and saying that we aren't reporting this when this is what we've been saying all along. So there's a problem with management, and there's a problem with the public and their view of the media. It's crazy. I've seen it. I've gone a lot of places as a journalist and been treated well. I've been treated with respect by some, but a lot of disrespect as well. It's crazy.
Yeah, and I definitely think that, the industry definitely has a lot of improvements to be made in the model that they're using to tell news, because I agree with you. It's a really old model, especially for the local news stations, which are still so focused on packages, 2-minute packages to fill a story on air, and not really investigating or investing time in seeing what's trending on digital platforms, which is where most of the audience is. And also, to add to that, back then, media definitely, we still have a lot of power as a news industry, but back then, if you weren't in the news industry or in entertainment somehow, it was really hard for you to get famous and find a platform to speak out and raise your voice. Nowadays, with digital platforms, it's like one tweet or one TikTok video, and you can be completely famous. Like the other day, I found this lady that cooks with mushrooms, and she was just giving so many recipes as to how mushrooms can be so healing. And it was like really cool. But when would you in the world have ever seen that on news organizations? Even today, like you don't see that. And I think that's part of the big shift that needs to happen, that these digital platforms are allowing every single person in the world to be authentically themselves and to have a huge following. And the media is 100% lagging behind on most digital platforms. And ratings are declining, and a lot of journalists are leaving the industry. Some are also going back, like how you're considering going back. But especially those journalists in smaller markets are getting completely burnt out by the coverage and are choosing different careers. I have several friends who I know have left the industry as well, and myself included. But Haley, I wanted to ask you, I guess you already answered one of my questions, which is a call to action to the news industry and what you would like them to change. But with those changes, can you speak to us about an experience that as a journalist has been very rewarding for you, and talk a little bit about the upside of the industry and being a journalist?
Yeah. There are some really, really high highs. It's like high highs and low lows,
Yeah.
and that's what kept me
It's
in the
a
industry
roller
for so
coaster.
long.
Yeah, it's so
Absolutely,
hard to
it
find a balance.
is. Yeah, and being someone with ADHD, when it all slowed down, it kind of all hit me after, was the emotional toll and really all the things I experienced in such a short amount of time. It's overwhelming. But I did have some really rewarding experiences. I love meeting people. I have told some awesome stories. I've had people open up to me, you know. Um, Journalists are generally confident, but I still, you know, struggle to ask very difficult questions to people who are in difficult situations. I've had a woman tell me her story about her daughter who died at a very young age, I think 7 or 8 years old. And I'm just standing there. It's very humbling and honoring to, you know, it's an honor to hear these stories and be trusted by people. You know, I've had a lot of people reach out to me and personally, you know, thank me for the impact I made with with their stories. Excuse me. So I really loved it for those reasons. It was the most rewarding thing. But in terms of a paycheck and in terms of vacation or getting a break and really feeling a work-life balance or mentally healthy, you're not going to get those rewards.
And how was the environment in the newsrooms that you've been in, without pointing names or without using call letters of your stations? Um, did you feel supported while you were struggling, for example, during COVID?
I have had some great bosses and some really great mentors. I felt like my boss, a lot of times calling him would be what would help me, you know, when I was stressed out. They would calm me down. So it was really a lot of pressure that I put on myself. And I think a lot of other journalists can relate to this. My bosses were really helpful. They tried to offer help. I worked as a multimedia journalist, which meant I worked alone. And, you know, they knew what I was up to. I pitched my stories to them and they approved them. But other than that, they really weren't part of the process at all. So asking for help was really difficult for me because I thought it would slow me down because I've got it all in here, you know, and I'm doing it so quickly that, yeah, if I had anyone else get involved and try to help me, that would slow me down. So I don't really blame my managers. I think that this change that's happening, it's got to be very overwhelming for a manager to see all these changes and not even know where to begin. How do you structure things when it's such a crazy industry? So many things are going on at once. I don't know how you can manage a newsroom. So I really don't know what the solution is. But this is my perspective as kind of like an entry level reporter. Is it's been really difficult to be heard. You know, I've spoken up several times about what I experience when I go out in the field, but they can't always act on it. It's usually like not my bosses, but they're higher up, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and props to those managers who have really taken the time to ask their journalists or their team, hey, how are you doing? Hey, I know it's been a little rough, but I hope you're okay. And let me know if you need a day off to take care of your personal health or to get back on your feet after covering a stressful, traumatic story or event. Especially when, asking those hard questions to grieving mothers or grieving families because of the death of loved ones. And then just a side note after that, for those non-journalists listening, multimedia journalist is a person or reporter who wears multiple hats. So normally a multimedia journalist or MMJ will be editing their own story, filming their own story, driving to whatever the story is, making the phone calls, finding the people to interview, while also setting up the camera so it faces you so you can record yourself to do your stand-ups to go on air. So it's the job of at least a photog, an editor, sometimes a producer, most times a producer, honestly, and the on-camera presence. It's at least 4 jobs in one day. It's a lot of stress. It's really hard. And sometimes mistakes are going to be made because you're doing way too many jobs in the amount of 8 to 9 hours. Haley, so you already spoke about the breaking point for you to leave the industry. I guess now that you have had this break to unwind, to, take care of yourself and are thinking of going back into the industry, What advice would you give yourself and your colleagues?
Take care of yourself. I did not take care of myself before. And so in some ways I'm thankful for COVID and how it's changed my life because slowing down caused me to take care of myself, like the littlest things, like drinking water in the morning, making breakfast regularly, being in a routine. The news industry is so crazy that it was so unpredictable. But usually, as soon as I would wake up, I'd be looking for story ideas until my first meeting so that I would have something to pitch. Because I was just always behind and always felt behind and always felt that stress and pressure. So, yeah, take it easy, really step back because I felt like I was just so wrapped up in COVID and in the news and in the politics. I was so wrapped up in it that I wasn't talking with my boyfriend at dinner. I wasn't sleeping at night because I was thinking about all these things going on in my head. So I think that every journalist should really take a break, and it's hard to take a break, and I think that managers in newsrooms are trying their best to encourage their employees to take care of themselves, but it's so much easier said than done. We had that every meeting, they're like, you guys are doing great, we know it's really hard, but the pressure is not off, we still got to put a show on. So do what you can to take care of yourself and be honest about the fact that you're not feeling yourself. Because it took me a while. It took me a long while to admit anxiety feelings and that things were not right with me. So, and I'm really glad I did it.
Yeah, and I actually have a great example of managers who were trying so hard to keep you motivated and their teams. So my former manager, he was so great and so understanding throughout my whole situation last year before I actually ended up quitting, that one day he knew I was struggling. He knew because I was getting sick constantly. And I think he just wanted so much to help me out that he congratulated me one day in an email to the whole office. An email was sent out every Friday in my previous newsroom congratulating every employee that had done something great. And sometimes it was like getting this great interview or, turning around 2 packages or, it was big things. And he goes, congratulations to Emiliana for filling in for our main anchor. And I used to fill in all the time. And it was so funny because I was like, wow, he's so kind. He's trying to lift me up. But at the same time, we put so much pressure on ourselves, like you were saying, and we're so hard on ourselves and we want to do so great that I was like, I don't even deserve this congratulations. Like, I know I'm not doing great right now,
Yeah,
And
I know
it's
that.
unfortunate, but props to him because he really tried to be empathetic and he knew, that I was struggling and he was trying to make it better. So that's really cool.
That's a really good point. And that reminds me that I feel like a lot of journalists do a lot of things. You kind of maybe accomplish a lot of things or jump over a lot of hurdles that isn't noticed because you're doing it out there on your own. I remember one time just needing to pull over on a side of a busy road
Yeah.
just to get some B-roll. And usually that would only take a few minutes, but because it was a busy road, I had to only park in someone's driveway. So there I was going from house to house, knocking on doors just to ask people if I could park in their driveway. And
Yeah.
that's just like one of those battles that you face in a day. And you just have to find a solution as soon as possible.
Exactly. And that it doesn't sound like a lot of time, but it takes a lot of time to do that. And it's time away from your editing or writing to get that story on air. Haley, and lastly, some words of wisdom you've picked up along the way that you want to share.
Something I've learned, and I'm still not the best at doing this, but I've learned this lately to be a really rewarding thing, is keeping in touch with people. Taking that extra effort to call someone, a former colleague. When I was really stuck this past winter, there were a couple months I really just I was so confused about what I wanted to do, if I wanted to leave news or not. And once I started talking to people on the phone, talking to my former colleagues, friends, family, they offered insight to how I've changed or what I'm good at, and really made me feel better. So keeping in touch with people. And of course, that's helped me with the job search, saying, hey, I'm looking for something, because especially in this industry, it helps to know someone. And we're in a position where we're looking for someone to take a chance on a journalist who will see that we can do something else.
Exactly.
So that would be my advice for anyone is, make that effort to keep in touch, stay engaged, whether it's through social media or picking up the phone.
Exactly. I totally agree. Is there anything else you want to add before we say goodbye?
No, I hope I didn't make the industry look too bad, because I've had some awesome experiences. It's just kind of hard to make it work. And I think a lot of journalists are figuring that out. A lot of people, don't stick with news. But thank you for what you're doing, sharing this story, knowing that other people went through this. It's a heartbreaking thing to give up your dream job. So thank you so much for connecting us all. I really appreciate it.
No, of course. I'm so thankful that you guys are, deciding to share your stories with us, because hopefully, every time I interview one of you guys, it just helps me on my healing journey as a journalist as well. And it reminds me why I love this job so much, why I'm so passionate about it. But also the challenges that come with it, and that it's nice to know that I wasn't the only one going through it. And I hope that this can help improve other journalists' mental health through your advice and everything you just said and telling us your story. And, hopefully also help the industry improve a little bit more, because there's definitely things that we can do better.
Absolutely.
Haley, thank you so much. It was so great speaking with you.
Great speaking with you too.
Journalists, this one's for you, to help you heal, to help you understand your worth, and to help you know you're not alone. So share the love and subscribe to Spotify and YouTube, and follow us on Instagram. The Awakened Journalist is proud to present Media Healers by Emiliana Molina Fajardo.